All right, welcome back to Life in Motion. We are interns at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, hoping to help early career professionals navigate the workplace with confidence. And I'm Amy.
And I'm Kristen. We're so glad you guys are all tuning in for today's conversation because we have a special guest joining us, and it's Dr. Tonya Pulley. So, welcome to Life in Motion. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, thanks for having me. I've worked on campus since 1997, so I've been here for a long time. Majority of my career, I was an academic advisor in kinesiology, biology, DGS. Now I'm back in AHS, and I'm the director of career services. And then also, oh, can you see me?
Yes.
Sorry. Had a little computer issue. And then also the director of honors programs for our college.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you for sharing about yourself, and thank you for joining us again on this podcast today.
Yes. And as someone that we know who has experience in career planning and services, we wanted to know your personal insight on interviewing and how to successfully prepare for an interview, whether this be for an internship or a professional job.
Yeah, so I provide this service called mock interviewing to all the students in AHS. And so some of them have to do a mock interview with me as part of a class, like a pre-internship class. But I also do this for any of our students that want to prepare for an interview. So I think one of the things that I try to remind students before they head into an interview is preparing ahead of time is going to go a long way towards helping you feel more comfortable in the interview, but also for you to be able to share all the great things about you and your background and what you've done. Because I don't think I know that all of us, in the moment when we have to talk about ourselves, it's really difficult to come up with a good answer. I always tell students, I'm not going to ask you anything difficult. I mean, these are all things about you. It's just that in the moment, it's really hard to do that. Whereas if you take some time before the interview, take some of the common questions that you're pretty sure you're going to be asked, prepare a nice, succinct yet rich answer, that's going to help you in the long run. Again, preparation, like I said, is, I think, my biggest recommendation for students. I know a lot of students talk to me about, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to be nervous. Well, you should be nervous. It's an interview. This is like the one place you're supposed to be nervous.
Mhm.
So I tell students it's not a problem if you're nervous. It's kind of normal. The only time that's a problem is if you feel so nervous that you aren't able to share all the great things about you. So that can, be an issue for sure, but practice can help with that quite a bit. I know the other thing the students always worry about is, oh, I don't know if I talked too long or I gave too long of an answer and for most people, I say, I would rather you err on the side of talking too much versus talking too little. When we come into an interview, the folks that are interviewing you have all the facts about you, right? They know your resume. If it's a grad school interview or something, they'll have your transcript, maybe your personal statement. If it's a job, they'll have your resume and cover letter. And so they liked your facts enough to bring you in for an interview. And so in the interview, I want them to get a better sense of who you are. Who is this person? We like your skills and your background, but we want to know who you are. And so in an interview, I, again, encourage students to share a little bit of personal information about themselves when they're introducing themselves. Um, the other thing I think is really important is to share your why. So they can see that you have this major and you have this minor, but why? Why did you pick those? Why is heading into this field important to you? And I think when students add those kinds of pieces of information, it really paints a more complete picture of who you are and why you do what you do. And I think that that gives folks a better understanding of, oh yeah, I understand why she wants to do this. So that's some of the biggest pieces of advice I could give.
Thank you. I know definitely sharing why you chose your major and even school is pretty common. I had an internship interview the other day and they asked that. And luckily I prepared for that and I
Good.
gave an answer for that. We also wanted to know like stuff about like cover letters and resumes, like
Sure.
what students should be doing, not be doing.
Absolutely. Um, the good thing for current students is you have access to me in AHS if you're an AHS student, but you also have access to the Career Center. And so I'm only one person and I'm serving like 1,200 students or something. Um, but we do have resources for resumes and cover letters and personal statements and mock interviewing. So make sure that you know where your resources are and also how to get in touch with the people involved. In terms of resumes, the more eyes, the better. So the more people you can get your resume in front of to just say, hey, what do you think about this? The better. I have some general kind of rules that I have for resumes. I always tell students it needs to be one color, one font, and one column. Now, the other big piece of advice I have is don't use a template. Now, let me explain why. If you Google resume template, or you go to Microsoft Word and you say, look for a resume template, more than likely the first 6 you're going to see violate those 3 rules I gave: one column, one font, one color. So that's the big reason. But the other reason is if you've ever tried to make changes in a template, it is extremely hard and frustrating because the format is locked. And so you can sometimes tweak the text a bit, but like if you want to move something, it can be a real nightmare. So what I tell students is find a resume that you like, that looks professional. Copy that format onto just a blank Word document or whatever. I think you'll have a much better experience going through everything if you do that. In terms of cover letters are actually a lot trickier, I think, than people realize.
Right.
The biggest thing that I think students wish what wasn't true is you really need to have a brand new cover letter for each job you're applying for. Now, obviously, you have some commonality with other parts of the cover letter, but in the middle part, it needs to be really aimed at the job. So what I tell folks to do is take your job description, highlight some of the key tasks they want you to do while you're in that job. Or sometimes job descriptions will say, here are the skills that we want the person in this job to have. Highlight those. Now, let's say you're applying for a job as a healthcare consultant. And some of the skills they're talking about is attention to detail, sharing findings with a small group or whatever. Now, you probably don't have experience doing those things in the healthcare setting, but go through your resume and say, oh, I had to communicate findings to a group of people in that one class I took where we had to do an oral presentation of a project, or whatever kind of experience you've had unrelated to healthcare. As long as you did that skill, you should include that. So saying things like, I see that you're looking for someone who's comfortable using Excel. In my research assistant position, we commonly used Excel to blah, blah, blah. So it's important that you highlight the biggest things that they want, and you get to give them examples of, yes, I can do these things. So those are my, recommendations for cover letters and resumes.
Yeah, I think those are very valuable.
Yeah.
resumes and cover letters.
Yeah.
And I think when actually going through the interview process, a question that always I stumble on is the STAR method questions, if you know about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always struggled with those. And I was wondering, how do you combat making a good STAR method question or answer
Well,
to the question?
yeah, when I do mock interviews, I only ask 5 questions, but
Mhm.
they are general questions that you are probably going to be asked, and one of them can be answered with STAR method. So one of the questions I always ask is, tell me about a time that you faced a challenge and how you dealt with it. And when someone asks that question in an interview, I think they're really trying to get at, how does this person solve problems? How do they think on their feet? How do they deal with stress or conflict or something like that? So choosing the best example is one thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's important. Sorry, my monitor is being a little bit weird. I think it's important to make sure that you think about telling someone about this situation who has no idea about anything. Like, they have no idea about the work you do. They have no idea about any of it. Because I think a lot of times students will start telling me something and I understand it because I've worked on this campus for a million years, but it's like, no, back it up and explain, oh, I was working with athletics. I was a videographer for the football team and my responsibility was blank. So that's the whole setting the stage thing. I think where students go wrong with that is not enough detail. Now, it needs to be related, obviously, but just not enough detail to force someone who doesn't know the situation to completely understand the issue you are dealing with or the struggle. The other thing that I think depending on the situation in those kind of questions is important is explaining what you learned in that difficult situation. So sometimes interviewers will ask, like, tell me about a time you faced a conflict at work or whatever. One of the important things is to say what you learned, because no matter what, the thing that you learned is going to be applicable to that job, probably to any job, probably to life. So make sure that you verbalize, wow, after this situation, I really learned how important it was to collaborate with my coworkers and I don't have to do it all myself or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I actually remember doing a mock interview with you for
Oh, really?
yeah, and you asked me that question and now I have a set answer for whenever
Good.
you asked me that. So it's pretty nice. And
Well, it's nice to learn that in when nothing's at stake, right?
yeah,
You're
yeah,
just
no, it's really
meeting with
helpful.
me to make you better. So,
Yeah.
well, good. I'm glad that helped.
Yeah. And also, obviously, going into interviews, you can prepare for the commonly asked questions.
Sure.
But what if you're sitting there and they throw you a curveball and you're faced with a question that you really do not know how to answer?
Well, and that happens, right?
Yeah.
And I've sat through interviews of other people, and I've been on a hiring committee on campus. I've done interviews where that happens, and it's clear the person didn't anticipate that question.
Mhm.
I strongly encourage folks to just stop, take a moment, and say, "That's a great question. Let me think about that." And even if you're only taking 15 seconds, it feels like forever if you were the one taking the pause, right? But to
Yeah.
everybody else, it doesn't. And just take a moment. If you have something to write on, write something down, that will help jog your memory. Um, but again, don't worry about taking a moment to think. And I explained that to a student the other day, and they said, well, won't that look bad? I said, you think it's going to look bad that you want to get your thoughts together before you speak? And he was like, oh, no, that doesn't look bad. Not at all. That's totally fine. But I also think if, you're in the moment and you're like, I got nothing. I don't know what to say here. I think it's totally fine to be honest and say, I think I'm a little nervous. Right now I can't come up with anything. Maybe we can come back to it. I think that's totally fine.
Never thought about that as an option.
I
That's
know a
actually
lot of folks don't.
yeah. Wow. Um, going along with that, then, just in general interviewing, what can you do about your body language to give the right message that you want to an employer?
I have interviewed, I don't know how many, it feels like thousands of students in mock interviews. And a lot of times I do it virtually because nowadays a lot of first round interviews are virtual. And so I think sometimes it's easier to get away with a bit of fidgeting when it's virtual. But you know if you're a fidgeter. And if you don't know, record yourself and you'll figure it out really quickly. I tell a lot of students who are like me and talk with their hands, sit on your hands. Just sit on your hands. If
That's
that's
something I do.
yeah, if you have to do it, do it. Now, honestly, I'm not sure if I could think if I was sitting on my hands, if I wasn't moving at least one hand. But the other thing that, I don't really see fidgeting as a big issue in the students I meet with, but something that is folks who have a habit of like moving around a lot. Now on like if you do a Zoom interview, it is horrible if the person is like moving their chair and doing that and you don't know you're doing it, I'm sure. I did a mock interview the other day with a student and I could tell he was using one of those standing desk, and I just said, buddy, I think you're gonna have to sit because it just, and I know why he does it because it's more comfortable for him and he can move. And I was like, we have to sit in a chair for you. But record yourself and you'll see really quickly if you have habits that can be distracting. Nobody really wants to record themselves, but it's the only way to really find out, or just, practice interviewing with a friend or me, and they'll be able to see that probably better than you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Another thing, honestly, I've never had to do it because I'm too scared, but maybe it's more of a thing that you do when you're higher up in the ladder. But when it comes to salary negotiations,
Yeah,
how do you even start the conversation?
right. That's really difficult. It will become more of an important item for you as you move further along in your career. Sometimes students coming right out of high school, whether that's getting into a grad school program or health professions program or whatever, it's like, somebody just take me, right? I don't care, just somebody hire me or admit me or whatever. And so it feels a lot like you're just waiting on them. Like, just say yes and I don't care about anything else. When in reality, I mean, you're also giving them money, right? If you're going to grad school. In a job, you need to know if this is something you're interested in. So there is more of an equal relationship, I think, than people sometimes realize, especially when you're just starting out. If I were to change jobs now, I wouldn't, I'm too close to retirement. But if I were to change jobs now, I would have to be going to a job that sounds just absolutely amazing because I like my job, right? So I would be in more of a position to be like, I'm holding out for more money, or I'm holding out for whatever the situation is with the work, because I do have something. If I don't get this job, I still have something. So I understand coming out of undergrad, it doesn't feel like that because you don't have a full-time job or whatever. Honestly, I know that the Career Center has a little bit of stuff they used to on salary negotiations. In our type of AHS jobs, I think it's less of a crucial issue coming right out of undergrad because we tend to go into positions that are helping. And so helping folks don't always make a lot of money. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm not sure that our students have to face that as much. I think it's like you said, later in the career kind of issue. But that being said, still go in with an idea of this is what I really need to make to have this position work for me. And that's about, yes, knowing your worth, but also having an understanding of like, what are my needs? And what do I need to make to have my own place, have a car, and have whatever? But at the same time, recognize you're just starting out, so there's that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
And especially with virtual interviews too, I think doing them online is a little less nerve-wracking than doing them in person. Personally, I don't think I've done an in-person interview since maybe high school. So all my
Right.
interview experience has always been on Zoom or Microsoft Teams.
Right.
And
And
you're
it
always
feels
staring at a person.
less
Yeah.
intrusive. Like I feel like when you do a Zoom interview, it's not like everybody's like staring at you, even though they are. I don't know why, but I think because you have this distance,
Mm-hmm.
that it is, to me, it's less nerve-wracking for sure.
Yeah. And as someone who's also like an introvert and I'm kind of shy, I used to find interviews very scary. And what would you have for advice for people that are more shy or introverted?
That's a great question. Because not all of us like to be the center of attention, and
Mhm.
want to just do small talk with people and, before and after the interview or whatever. People that are more introverted and don't feel as comfortable putting themselves out there, the good news is you don't really have to initiate anything in an interview, right? I mean, they're going to initiate it. They're going to ask you questions and you're going to answer. And the catch is not to be tempted to have a really short answer just because you want to stop talking. That's the temptation. It's not like you have to do a big presentation or anything like that, but you are just responding to questions they initiate. But again, remember, an interview is your time to show everybody who you are and why you do this and why they want you. And it's difficult, I recognize, but again, preparing ahead of time, having some answers written out that you have gone over a few times. I'm not saying I want you to memorize it like lines in a play, but at least having something to fall back on that you have prepared, I think will help in those situations to feel a little bit more comfortable.
Mhm. I know something that's also helped me is on my MacBook, I'll record myself and I'll just talk to myself and look at myself while also answering
Absolutely.
questions and also having friends or other people to do
Yes.
mock interviews first before you go
Yep.
meet someone you don't know gets you more
Absolutely.
comfortable.
And I always tell students, like, I have a big monitor right here, but let's say I'm doing it on my laptop, have a friend just sit there on the other side as you practice or as you give your answers. And then for me, it's easier to talk to like an actual person. I hated online teaching during the pandemic because none of my students would turn on their camera and I was literally staring at myself the whole time. And so that's really hard. So for me, if there's at least a person there, then I feel like, okay, I'm actually talking to someone and it feels more comfortable for me.
And I know something after interviews, it's pretty like nice to send a thank you message afterwards. And what do you think's the best way to follow back on something you haven't heard about from
Yeah.
a HR recruiter?
Yeah, usually, hopefully, before your interview, you'll get some sort of notification about, oh, here's our interview. Here's who's going to be in the meeting. And so you'll have those names, but then at the beginning of the interview, everyone should go through and introduce themselves. Hi, I'm the director of whatever, whatever. Oh, I'm an HR person, and have something to write on, write that down. And then when you come back after your interview, Individual emails, if you can get everybody's contact information, try to do individual emails. If not, whoever your contact person is, for that position. And, something very simple. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today. I really enjoyed finding out more about blankety blankety blank. Feel free to reach out if there's anything else you need from me. That's it. I think that's plenty.
Yeah, I think it's
And
something so simple but easy to forget.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
And going along with that, if you finish interviewing and you send out the thank you emails and then you're sitting there and you're waiting and you just don't hear back, is there anything that you can do on your part, or is it just they're not interested?
Well, I will say this. It depends on where you're applying, of course, but like at the university, the process to get someone hired or even to get to the point to where you want to make an offer to someone can take so long. You would think everybody just meets in one room and it's like, okay, we love this person. Somebody send her an email. It just doesn't work. Like we have to write out all of these reasons why we're not doing the offer to all these other people. And it's a whole ridiculous thing. But my point is that really takes time, and it's time that is horrible to wait through if you're the one doing, interviewing. So I would give it maybe, well, I would have my last question in the interview be, what does the timeline look for this process? Or when are you hoping to make a decision? And they will usually tell you. So they'll, maybe it's like, oh, in 2 weeks, we hope to have a decision. So I would say if they say, okay, 2 weeks from today, and you don't hear anything, then I would say the next day, just reach out and say, hi, I'm just following up, seeing if there's anything else you need from me. And they may be like, oh, our group hasn't been able to meet because someone went on vacation or whatever. Or usually they have to wait for the person they offer it to think about it and accept before they contact everybody else that didn't get it. In case that person declines it, and then they do have to go to the next person. So the sad part is that can take a lot of time, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense. But
And I know how you start an interview is also important from what I've heard, building a general rapport with your interviewer, and just a small talk too, I've noticed is important the more interviews I'm doing. And how do you think that you should go by building that relationship?
It's funny because I spend all day talking to people, all day. I've had a lot of positions where I'm up in front of hundreds of people speaking, presenting, whatever. And I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is the small talk. Like I'm in an environment with people I don't know, and I have to try to, I don't know, engage them in some way. I'm not the greatest person to ask about that, which is my point. But I do think it's important to just remain calm. You'll be nervous. We know that, but do the best you can to remain calm. Think about going into the interview happy. And I think when people go in happy, they are more, I don't know, they seem more approachable. They seem to want to interact with people more. I've had students I've interviewed who I think they're just nervous, but they come across as very serious.
Mhm.
And it doesn't make me want to chat them up. I'm like, oh, I don't think they want chatted up. They look a little intense or whatever. So I always think that you should come in just feeling happy, being excited to meet some new people, find out more about the company or the school or whatever. And that will make it, I think, seem a little bit better. But again, they'll probably do most of the talking. They usually, because they know each other. So they'll probably do most of the talking. I don't think that's your responsibility.
What, in your experience, is your best interview with a student?
Yeah. It's funny because students tend to do the same things in interviews. And so one of my jobs is to encourage them to add as much detail from their experiences as possible to sort of, strengthen their answers. The good interviews are those when I feel like the student really is excited about the prospects of this position. So, maybe it's something in public health, internship in public health, and they really just have a passion for public health. They grew up in an underserved community, and they know about how difficult it is to have equal access to healthcare across even one city. And so for them, it's like a motivating thing. And they love the courses, they love the way blank, 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 whatever. Those students who seem genuinely excited about the position, I think always do better. But I think the key, though, is not just being excited about the position, but sharing an understanding about the skills you're going to need in that position and how you have them. And you saying, oh yeah, I did this position, and so I did a lot of XYZ. And so that, I think that's really going to translate well to this internship, you know. Those are the ones I think that do the best.
Yeah, I think that directly translates how much passion you have in your major or
Exactly.
career.
Exactly. Oh, one more thing I want to say that I have one question I always ask students, which is, why should I hire you? Or admit you if it's grad school. And students tend to answer in the same way. They answer that I'm a really hard worker. I have attention to detail. I make sure blah, blah, blah. I like working in groups, whatever, whatever. So like these personal characteristics about themselves. Well, when they give me those answers, most of the time it's an answer that would fit if I was hiring an academic advisor or a babysitter or someone to do my yard work. Like they're just general things about them that would make them a good employee anywhere. But what I want them to say is, why would I be a good fit for this job, this particular job? And every student, to the student, forgets, oh, hi, I'm getting a degree in this. Like, I have a whole degree in this. That's the biggest reason, right? And then, talk about your experiences and such. But I think being too general with the why should we hire you is a tendency. But I think being more specific about why they should hire you for this particular job is what students really need to answer.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like that goes kind of in hand with making sure that when you research the actual job position and you're writing your resume, that you're thinking about how you're going to use those I guess pieces from your resume to
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, before we wrap up, if you could give one piece of career advice to students about to graduate, what would it be?
That's a tough one. I would probably say use your resources. Maybe you have family that has professional jobs. Go to them. Have them look at your resume. You have me, you have the Career Center. Use the people around you, your professors, who are in the field, or even not just in the field, have been a professional for a long time. Use them to help you craft your resume and cover letter and prepare for your interview. But remember, it's not a one-shot thing. Getting a job takes time. And although we'd love it to be quick and easy, it oftentimes isn't. So be persistent, but try to remember it will happen. We just have to continue plugging along.
Yeah, it definitely takes time. It's not an easy process as I wish it would be.
We wish, right?
But thank you for your advice. That was very
Absolutely.
insightful.
Absolutely.
And thank you also for joining us. We love to hear you. And I know it's going to help a lot of students and others that are listening to this podcast. And we really appreciate your time in coming here.
Great. It's been a lot of fun being here.
And before we wrap up, where can our listeners find you if they want to connect
Yeah,
with you?
so the best way to reach me is at careers@ahs.illinois.edu. That's how you get in touch with me, and we could set up a time to meet. And we'll get whatever your current situation is dealt with and help you move on towards the next step.
That sounds
Yeah, that's
perfect. We can
perfect.
put that in the link to our
Great.
video and our podcast. And
Great.
that's it for today's episode. Again, huge thank you to you for joining us. And if you found this helpful, make sure to follow Life in Motion and share it with a friend who might be interested. We'll be back soon with another episode, and we release them every Friday at 5 p.m. Thank you all for listening. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.